What's up, foes? Alright, so now I'm going to get started. I'm going to do the carburetor swap out, see how that goes, because it's, the throttle cable and everything's a little bit out of spec in terms of its length. It's actually a bit too long, and we're going to see how all this stuff works together. The other thing I'd like to tackle is at least swapping out the countershaft sprocket. I think I might as well just go to the 17, even though I think it might be a bit too much. I'll try it anyway. Like I said in the previous video, the bike doesn't have a lot of, well, it doesn't have a lot of too much of anything when it comes to power. But if I could get the gear ratio, the transmission to be a little bit more usable, a little bit more wider, I think it would help quite a bit. It's basically the choices of the manufacturer that put the bike in this situation. It could be, like I said before, it could be a lot more than what it is, but it is what it is, I guess. So I think maybe a better starting point might be a bike with, well, for one, I think a bike with better horsepower to weight ratio would probably be better, no? But it's not just that. I feel like I can kind of safely come up with an opinion when it comes to the signs that I see from this particular manufacturer. But when I talk about manufacturer, I don't mean X Pro. They are not the manufacturer. I'm talking about Zuma or Zuma or whatever they call themselves. I don't think they care about any of this, like, I kind of wanted to point out a few things that I've learned over the past year and a half or whatever it is, a year of owning this bike, and seeing how the manufacturers operate, what the patterns are as well, of like how they do things, how they do business, how they manufacture parts and part availability and all this stuff. There's a lot to it. And what I've learned is that if I was to ever become a dealer for any of these manufacturers, it sure as heck wouldn't be Zuma. That's for damn sure. I say that because I just see too many things that come from this company that is below status quo of what it could be. Now, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of other companies that are like that too. But there's also a few select companies that are not anything like that. There are some that have more advantages too than others. And when I say advantages, I mean, I basically mean that some manufacturers in China, they have a lot of experience, not all, but a lot of them do. They have a lot of experience of making parts for other big brand companies. I'm talking about companies like KTM. And I have found several of them. These particular manufacturer that I'm thinking of doesn't actually sell directly to consumers or even dealers. They only sell to trading companies who sell their product. And I think the reason why they do that is this particular company does not want to be bogged down dealing with warranty claims or problems directly from an end user. And I can totally understand that. It makes a lot of sense if that's what your focus is manufacturing, that you don't want to be tied up doing stuff like supporting end users when, you know, it might be better to just have an intermediary or a distributor take care of it. But I have to say, based on this, the things that I've talked about in a lot of these videos already about this bike, and seeing other videos of other products that X Pro sells that is made and manufactured by Zuma, there is no way that I would ever want to be selling products from Zuma as either my own brand or under anybody else's brand for that matter. And it's just because, like, I just have seen now too much of too many things that really bother me in terms of things that are completely preventable that they don't care about. And as good as X Pro is at following through with warranty stuff, parts, broken things, they are pretty good at that. But unfortunately, they don't seem to have any clue when it comes to, like, what makes a bike good, or what can be improved on a bike, or anything on the manufacturing side. And, you know, like, I remember Mike Festivos on several videos talking about, you know, contacting X Pro to maybe coax them into making a like an expert version of a particular machine with adjustable suspension and aluminum rims. And I think it's a great idea, but I think, you know, you might as well talk to a bread box, because Zuma, I mean X Pro, does not seem to have the foggiest idea of any of the stuff that you're talking about. I'm not talking about simple things like rim changes and things like that, or adjustable suspension. I'm talking about it on a bigger level. There's some major things that, well, they're not major, but the major things that I'm talking about, or the things that I'm talking about, they really do dictate how the bike handles and how it performs and what type or what level a particular bike is on due to the choices that they make. And when you try to explain that to X Pro, it's like completely a waste of time. I've had several conversations with them, and I have to be honest, they drive me nuts, because these things that we're telling them, Mike included, Mike Festiva included, these are things that really could make a significant difference, you know, in the performance and even the geographics of who is buying these bikes. Unfortunately, I think X Pro, due to their lack of understanding or knowledge or whatever it is, it seems to me that they are only concerned about people that don't know any better, and they're selling them these bikes and they just hope for the best, because X Pro, I'm pretty sure, has been around for a while now, and I don't see any of the changes being made to these bikes. I mean, minor stuff, yeah, like bracket alignment or something like that, but that's not really where the problem really lies. Anybody can fix, you know, a bracket alignment problem or something minor like that. It's when you start to get into, like I was saying before, suspension valving and all this different stuff that really does or can make a huge difference. And, like, it's kind of frustrating to never, to you know, email, say, X Pro about a particular problem and go into some detail of what it would take to fix it. The truth is they don't even know what you're talking about. They don't really care, because as long as people keep buying the bikes, they really could care less. They're like, why are we going to change anything? I'm just speculating, but that's the impression I get, is why are we going to change all this or change that or contact the manufacturer about a problem when nobody or the average person doesn't know any better. They're not even saying anything about it. Like I was saying before, my last videos, I mentioned this before, but the suspension valving is such an easy thing to fix from a I'm talking about it from a manufacturing perspective. If you're making a suspension and you're valving it the wrong way, you can just as easy valve it the right way, you know? And when I was looking at a video that I had made, it was a very short video. The video was not actually for public consumption, but it is up on my channel. I'll see if I can maybe put a link in the description to that or on the screen. But it was just like a, I don't know, 20-second video or something. And it had the stock shock in it. And I was trying to explain to X-Pro that this incredibly slow rebound on the shock could actually be very dangerous to somebody under 145 pounds because they just don't have the mass to blow through that stroke. And looking at the video, I'm like, wow, that's wicked bad. It's like, it makes this look perfect comparatively. And this is still a little bit too slow, even with the suspension's rebound turned up maximum, because if you remember, this is not a stock shock. It's a DNM with adjustable rebound. The rebound is on the fastest it can go, and it's still a little bit too slow. Now, one of the things I didn't touch on about the suspension, and I realized this is very technical for a lot of people, and I don't mean it to get overly technical, but I do need to make some points here. And one of the things that I definitely want to point out that I don't think I really touched on as much as I would have liked is when it comes to suspension and the behavior of that suspension. The design has a lot to do with its performance. So, on a bike like, say, I'll use a KDX for an example because I've had enough of them, but it could be any older bike too, any Honda CR, any KX, any Suzuki RM, the RMX, even the small, even the little XR 100s and 80s for that matter. They are basically using the rear suspension is using a linkage type of system, and a linkage system has a huge impact on the way the suspension travel works. I'm going to go into that a little bit further here in just a sec. Just trying to get all this stuff apart here. So, anyway, it has a linkage has a huge impact on how suspension works. So when a bike that has linkage, the shock the shock is designed to work with that linkage. And what the linkage does and what can be modified on linkage is the linkage curve. That's the curve. I'm not saying physical curve. I'm talking about the dampening on the suspension as the bike compresses it. Most linkages, what they do is they have a progressive linkage curve. And as the bike goes through its stroke and the swing arm comes up as the suspension compresses, the linkage itself is designed so as you approach the area where you would be bottoming out the shock, it will ramp up the resistance to that due to the linkage curve. The way that the suspension compresses by the way the linkage arcs through its stroke as the shock compresses into it. It ramps up the suspension curve, so as it gets closest to its full bottoming out position, the linkage will change that curve so it ramps up right towards the end to make it less likely to bottom or more bottom resistant. Okay? So on a single shock design, say like a KTM EXC or an SX or whatever, where there is no linkage, the shock is bolted directly to the swing arm, that valving in that shock is designed specifically for that type of attachment. That shock would not work well if you tried to put that same shock on a linkage-based suspension system. Those shocks are valved specifically for that, and many of them even have progressively wound springs. So towards the end of the spring coil on the shock, the coils get tighter and more resistance is applied, and that has roughly the same effect as the linkage does curve as it progressively gets closer to the bottoming amount, where it starts to top out the suspension. The PDS shocks, like the KTMs, are designed to work that way so that they ramp it up with both valving changes and progressively wound coil springs. Well, this is what some people might call a PDS shock because it doesn't have linkage and it's bolted directly to the swing arm. But I assure you, there is no such engineering in any of this. They just take these shock bodies right off the shelf and they bolt them right on. That's why a lot of the performance on these bikes from model to model can be night and day. Some are way oversprung, most are way oversprung, but the valving is way off because these shock manufacturers like D&M make a good quality product, but they have no idea what manufacturer is going to spec out their shock for their bike design. So the only way to get it right is you would have to have D&M. If you worked, say, on a frame like this, you would have to have a conversation with D&M to make sure that it was valved properly for this particular setup. Now, the angle of the shock has a huge impact on the way it performs. So all this comes into play, but I assure you that Zuma does not care about any of it. They just throw these bikes together, and whatever happens, happens, you know, from model to model. And I've seen some doozies of videos that show some really ridiculous problems. One example, I'm going to see if I can find the clip of this, but my brother had purchased a X Pro 300 EFI, what's the name of it? Palladium or something like that? Paladin. That's what it was. Paladin. And the Paladin, he bought it because he hadn't been on a bike in a long time and he was going to get a bike for his kids. And everybody was going to ride, and I was like really super happy about that. And he ended up selling the bike before he even really rode it. And he pointed out a few reasons why. And I have to tell you, I was absolutely like, I was really upset because, well, not only because he got rid of the bike before he even rode it, but also because when he showed me some of the stupid engineering problems, I was like, that right there is a prime example of what I'm talking about in this video right now. On his suspension system, I'm going to show you an image of it right now. There's a shock with a piggyback reservoir, meaning the reservoir of the shock, the nitrogen reservoir, is part of the shock body, and it comes out and comes down. And that's where all the adjustments for high speed and low speed compression are typically. And at the bottom of the shock you would have rebound, and that is a linkage based bike, right? But when I saw the stupidity of this problem, I was like, well, that just tells me everything I need to know about Zuma's mentality when it comes to manufacturing these bikes. That's what my point is that the manufacturer of the shock, which I believe was branded Zuma, just like the stock shock on this bike, believe it or not, the body, the reservoir body of the shock was actually in the way of its own preload rings. So you couldn't even set the preload properly to your weight because the rings actually hit the reservoir on the shock. I was like, well, that tells me everything I need to know about Zuma. So I will never go in that direction again. X-Pro doesn't seem to be aware of any of this. And when I brought it up to them, they were clueless. And my brother was like, well, I'm getting rid of this bike. So there you go. There's a prime example of like just completely not caring and just basically overlooking everything. Alright guys, a little change of plans here. I had to put the Nibbi carb back on due to a clearance issue. So I have a new intake manifold coming in the next day or so. So I'll continue this when I get that. I just need one that's just, I don't know, about maybe 8 to 12 millimeters taller than this one. Because the carburetor is taller, the overflow hits the fins, so it's just not going to work with that existing intake manifold. That's a bummer. So anyway, I'm going to continue on with this when I get the intake manifold back. In the meantime, I'm just going to swap out the 15 tooth sprocket. Remember that stock is 14. I'm going to go up to a 17, which is an extreme, because for every tooth on the front you go up, it's like going up about 3.5 on the back. So I'm going to have to loosen the axle and slide it forward slightly to get more slack from the chain, and then make the necessary adjustments here. So let's get set up to do that. Now this is a aftermarket DID chain. I didn't use the factory chain because I have experience using factory chains that are that caliper, that the one that it came on this bike, and they are totally not worth even bothering. I really don't even know why they bother to put a chain on a bike if you know you're going to have to replace it very quickly. So it's just not worth it. Come on. Wow. Crap. Let me loosen this other bolt here on the axle. Okay, it's going to be 17 on the axle side, 19 on the nut side. Needs a bath big time. Haven't really touched it in a long time. Alright, my guess is it looks like a 10 and a 12. Jeez, there's not much room here. Much less than I thought. Hope this isn't going to be a problem. These chain adjusters suck. And I like the old style ones on the old, and well, actually all of the old bikes, at least most of the trail bikes, had snail adjusters, which that's done from back here. Much better design. This sucks. This originally was designed for motocross bikes, but it's not that conducive to quick or easy chain adjustment on an off-road bike. I really don't know why they chose this particular version of it, but it's definitely not the best. Well, it took way more work than it should have, and that's because these chain adjusters, I remember seeing a video of this somewhere else, but the chain adjusters themselves are not actually threaded into the swing arm. They're floating in there. I did remember seeing somebody with the bike that got tired of dealing with this. And the only reason why I haven't done this already is because I never really needed to adjust the chain, because when I bought the bike I never used the factory chain. I put a DID, so it never stretched anyway. But if I had to deal with these things all the time, I would definitely modify these too. But it seems like the running theme with these bikes, you know, like if you can do all of this, how do you overlook something as simple as this? That's the stuff that really makes me say that I would not buy, like if I went into selling these for a living, I would never buy from Zuma because of stupid things like this. And to be honest, it seems like that is the norm. Like this kind of mentality, how you go 75-80% there and then you just give up when it comes to putting stuff together. I just don't understand the mentality there. I guess I don't have to understand it, but I can tell you that if I'm selling these things, I sure as hell wouldn't deal with it. Just horrendous design choices, and for no reason really. I mean, it doesn't, if you can make a frame and do all this stuff and pick the right engine and, you know, make a lot of great components, what the heck is this? I got a Mickey Mouse stuff, like the last portion of the bike. That's, you know, like, I just don't get it. Stupid. And this is honestly why I think so many Chinese manufacturers have, you know, people have opinions. This is why. It's dumb things like this. Shouldn't be fighting to get this bolt out. This bolt is not even threaded in. The only reason why it's not coming out easily is probably because of mud or rust. Ridiculous. Another job that probably should take 10 or 15 minutes is now going to take an hour and 15 minutes or more. It's really hard for me to get behind these companies when they do stupid things like this. Now look at that. That thread is all messed up. From what, I have no idea. This is the part that was actually in the swing arm. So it's a wreck. I just cleaned it up a little bit, and it's not enough. Ridiculous. So this is where the 15-minute job turns into 2 hours. Alright, I'm just going to get this taken care of, and then we'll cut back to the rear sprocket. I want to show you what's going on with that. And also the installation, or the reinstallation of the chain and sprockets. But I'm kind of upset right now because my goal was to get this done and go out and test it and be able to show you what's going on, but obviously it's pretty much dark now, so that's not going to happen. Alright, I'm going to cut this out and we'll just get back to the bike.